The void was silent, eternal, and uncaring. In that silence, the alien vessel HFY War drifted like a dying ember in the darkness between galaxies. Its once proud engines were no more than frozen husks, torn apart by a freak collision with debris from an ancient, forgotten war. The crew, 37 souls, huddled in the failing life support chambers, rationing oxygen as if stretching minutes into days could keep despair at bay. Captain Raylan pressed his clawed hand against the cracked viewport. Beyond it, nothing, but endless blackness sprinkled with distant stars. So far away, none could be reached. His voice was hoarse when he spoke. "Transmit again, even if no one hears." The communications officer hesitated. "Captain, we've sent 53 distress calls. This sector is uncharted. No beacon responds." "Send it again," Raylan whispered. "Because if we stop calling, then we've already given up." The crew obeyed. Another signal. Another cry cast into the abyss, knowing full well no Empire's patrols reached this far. The great trade routes bent around this void for a reason. It was dead space, empty, hopeless. Hours passed. The recycled air grew thin, each breath heavier than the last. Raylan closed his eyes and prepared himself for the inevitable. Perhaps no one would ever even find their remains. Perhaps their last message would scatter forever in static. Then the comm crackled. At first, the crew thought it was madness brought on by hypoxia. A voice, deep, firm, and clear, cut through the static like a blade. "Unidentified vessel. Distress signal received. Hold position. We are coming." Every crew member froze. The voice carried no alien clicks or harmonics. It was something far more startling, far more impossible. It was human. Raylan staggered toward the console. "Repeat. Identify yourself." There was no hesitation. "United Earth-Navy Warship Resolute. Coordinates locked. Prepare for assistance." The crew exchanged fearful looks. Humans. Of all the species in the galaxy, the humans were the least expected in this sector. Rumors painted them as restless explorers, unpredictable warriors who had fought empires twice their size and survived. But what in the stars was a human warship doing out here, beyond mapped space? The comms officer whispered, "Captain, should we answer? What if this is a trap?" Raylan thought of his people, pale and weak under the failing lights, of children curled in their parents' arms with no more strength to cry. Trap or not, they had no choice. "Respond. Tell them, we accept." 2 hours later, sensors picked up the approach. It emerged from the darkness like some colossal predator born of myth, armor plates gleaming silver gray, its silhouette vast enough to blot stars from view. The alien crew trembled at the sight of it. A warship. Not a freighter, not a rescue craft. A vessel built for battle, bristling with weaponry, yet moving with a slow, deliberate grace that made the HFY War seem like a leaf adrift beside a mountain. Raylan swallowed hard. Open channel. The human face appeared on the screen. An officer with tired eyes but a steady expression. "This is Captain Elias Ward of the Resolute. We've locked your hull. Prepare to be boarded by our medical and engineering teams." Raylan hesitated. "Why? Why help us? You don't even know who we are." Ward's reply was simple, unflinching. "Because you called. And we heard." The boarding was swift. Humans in armored suits crossed the frozen corridor, their movements efficient. Their voices calm even as the aliens recoiled in fear. They brought oxygen tanks, blankets, and food packs. Some crew wept openly as warmth and breath returned to them. When the engines were inspected, a grim truth was revealed. The HFY War would never fly again. Its core was split, its frame too unstable to repair. The ship was a tomb waiting to close. Raylan met Ward in the ruined command deck. You could have left us, Raylan said softly. Taken our supplies. Salvaged our wreck. No one would ever know. Ward looked at him for a long time, then placed a hand on the cracked console as if grounding himself in the moment. Maybe no one else would know, he said. But we would, and that's enough. The alien captain felt his throat tighten. There was no deception in those human eyes, only weariness and determination. The evacuation began. One by one, the crew of HFY was ferried aboard the human warship. They walked into cavernous halls lined with steel, into air that smelled of oil and ozone, guided gently by humans who treated them not as burdens, but as lives worth saving. Some of the younger aliens stared at the weapons lining the ships, walls whispering in awe at the power surrounding them. Yet, to their surprise, none of it was turned on them. The humans guarded, but never threatened. Helped, but never demanded. When the last survivor stepped off the ruined vessel, Raylan turned one final time to the ship that had carried his people through 100 journeys. It would not carry them any further. He whispered a farewell in his tongue, then followed the humans back into the Resolute. Later, in the human mess hall, Raylan found Ward watching the stars through the viewport. Captain Ward, Raylan began, his voice heavy with questions. Why did you answer so quickly? How did you even hear us, this far from any world? Ward didn't look away from the endless dark. Because deep space is cold, Captain, and no one should be alone out here. Not human, not alien, doesn't matter. He paused, then added in a tone that felt carved from iron. Every distress call we hear, we answer. Without hesitation. Raylan could only bow his head. The galaxy often whispered of human aggression, of their wars, their relentless drive. But now he saw another truth, one just as dangerous, just as powerful. Humanity's will to fight was fierce, yes, but fiercer still was their refusal to let the lost remain lost. When the survivors were delivered safely to the nearest station weeks later, stories spread quickly. Stories of a human warship that came when no one else could, that gave life where there should have been death. And so, a new tale began to echo across the galaxy's taverns, ports, and councils. That in the deepest void, when hope flickered its last, a human voice had spoken, and when it did, it answered without hesitation. The convoy drifted like a wounded animal through the black gulfs between stars. 7 freighters, heavy with cargo, had been meant for safe delivery along the known trade routes. But a miscalculated jump, one single slip in the navigational matrix, had flung them far beyond charted space. Out here, the void pressed in like a predator's jaws, silent, merciless, and endless. Captain Dara of the lead freighter tightened her grip on the command rail as the sensor alarms screamed again. The raiders were closing in. Dark, needle-like ships slid from the void, their engines hot with hunger. Scavengers of the abyss. They had no banners, no allegiance, only the certainty of violence. The convoy's meager defenses, old turrets and escort drones, would not hold for long. Dara's comm officer looked pale. Captain, what do we do? Her throat was dry. We send the call. Again. The distress signal had been looping for hours. She knew it was useless. No navy patrolled this region. No empire laid claim to it. They were lost, forgotten, and about to be devoured. Still, the signal pulsed outward, a heartbeat in the darkness, and then, impossibly, it was answered. The comm crackled with sudden clarity. A voice, firm, steady, and unmistakably alien to them. This is the United Earth Navy vessel Vigilant. Hold formation. Assistance inbound. The freighter crew stared in stunned silence. Humans. Of all species to answer, it was the one least expected. The humans were distant, secretive, their fleets rarely seen outside their territories. Many called them reckless, too willing to fight against impossible odds. But what was a human warship doing here, in this forsaken void? Dara forced herself to breathe. Transmit reply. Identify our convoy. Request immediate aid. The raiders were nearly upon them, weapons hot. She prayed this was not some cruel trick. Then the stars shifted. From the blackness emerged a colossal shadow, darker than the void itself, until its hull caught the distant light and gleamed with cold steel. The Vigilant. It was massive, larger than any freighter, dwarfing the raiders like a predator among scavengers. Armor plating scarred from 100 battles lined its sides. Its weapons arrays hummed with restrained power, silent but ready. A shudder passed through the convoy as every crew realized the same truth. This was not a patrol craft. It was a warship, a fully armed human destroyer. The raiders hesitated. For the first time, the predators faltered. Dara's comms flared alive again. Convoy Dara, this is Captain Marcus Hale of the Vigilant. You are under our protection. Maintain position and do not engage. We'll handle the rest. His voice carried no boast, no arrogance, only certainty. The raiders broke their hesitation and lunged, perhaps thinking numbers could overwhelm even this human titan. But they did not understand. The Vigilant moved. Its engines roared like thunder through the vacuum, driving the massive ship forward with terrifying grace. Turrets rotated, targeting arrays locked, and then the void lit with fury. Blue-white lances tore through raider hulls as if they were paper. Missile pods unfolded like wings, spitting fire that streaked across. The black to blossom into blossoms of destruction. The raiders scattered in panic, their confidence dissolving in the face of overwhelming firepower. The convoy watched in stunned awe as the human warship danced among the enemy, a steel leviathan wrapped in flame and shadow. Wherever its guns turned, raiders died. Within minutes, it was over. The void was littered with wreckage, drifting bodies of shattered ships. The Vigilant slowed, engines dimming as it returned to the convoy's side. The silence that followed was heavier than the battle itself. Every freighter crew sat in breathless wonder, shaken not just by survival, but by the impossibility of it. Dara finally opened a channel. Her voice trembled. Captain Hale, we owe you everything, but why were you even here? This region, it's empty. The human captain's face appeared on the screen. His uniform was worn, his eyes weary, but calm. Because you called, he said simply, and we heard. They were escorted for days through the dead zone, the Vigilant watching over them like a silent sentinel. The freighter crews whispered among themselves in mess halls and corridors. Some called it a miracle, others a phantom encounter. For many, humans had been distant rumors, strange warmakers from another spiral arm. But here, in the endless dark, they had come like saviors. Dara often found herself staring at the warship through her viewport. It moved with quiet authority, scarred yet unbroken, as though it carried with it the very weight of humanity's will. On the final day, before parting at the edge of charted space, Captain Hale sent one last transmission. His voice was steady, but his words would echo in Dara's memory forever. Remember this, out here, in the dark, we don't abandon the lost. Humanity does not turn away, not ever. And then, without waiting for thanks or reward, the Vigilant engaged its engines and vanished into the void, leaving only legends behind. Months later, when Dara and her convoy finally reached the great ports of civilization, they told their story. Many scoffed at first. A lone human warship, appearing where none should be, fighting off raiders with godlike fury, only to vanish again? It sounded like a tale spun in desperation. But those who looked into the captain's eyes knew it was no story. It was truth. And soon the whispers spread across systems and empires alike. of a phantom human warship, unseen until the moment of despair, that answered distress calls without hesitation. Some called it chance, others called it myth. But for those who had lived it, there was no question. In the endless dark, when hope was gone, humanity came, and when they came, they answered, always. The dying star cast its last flickering light upon the broken station. Dr. Valon stood alone in the observation dome, his six-fingered hands pressed against the glass. The station was failing, its orbit degrading, its power cells drained, its life support already flickering. He had sent out 100 distress calls, screaming into the void, but deep down he knew no one would ever hear. This was the edge of everything. Beyond this point, the maps ended. Civilizations no longer reached. Valon was utterly alone. He whispered into the silence, "This is how I end. Alone, forgotten, drifting." Then the calm crackled. At first, he thought it was another hallucination. Hunger and exhaustion had already blurred reality into dream. But the sound was real, a voice, deep and human, breaking through the static like fire through night. "Unknown station, we have received your signal. Hold position. We are inbound." Valon froze. His heart skipped in his chest. "Impossible," he whispered. No ship should be here. No one should even know this sector existed. Yet the signal had come. Clear, calm, and steady. And it was human. An hour later, sensors lit with a massive return. From the darkness emerged a warship, colossal and scarred, moving with the slow weight of ages. Its hull bore the marks of battles, long past, scorched plating, patched breaches, the faint glimmer of obsolete insignias. The vessel dwarfed the station. Ancient though it seemed, its very presence was overwhelming. A warship, not a freighter, not a rescue craft. A warship from another era. The comms opened again. "This is the battleship Titan's Wrath. We have your station in lock. Prepare for boarding." Valon stumbled backward from the console. The name was familiar, whispered in archives. The Titan's Wrath had been thought destroyed centuries. Ego, one of the last ships of a forgotten human war. If it still lived, then it had been wandering deep space for generations. He didn't know whether to feel awe or terror. The humans arrived in armored suits, their boots echoing against the station's failing floors. Their faces were marked with age and wear, their uniforms patched 100 times over. These were not the polished soldiers of propaganda, but survivors. One stepped forward, removing his helmet. His eyes were hard, his beard streaked with gray, yet his voice was steady when he spoke. "I am Commander Alaric Ward. You are safe now." "Safe?" Valon almost laughed. You don't even know me. Why save me?" The human studied him for a long moment, then simply said, "Because you called, and we heard. The station could not be salvaged. Its core was collapsing, its orbit decaying into the dying star's gravity. The humans moved quickly, transferring Valon and what little research he could salvage aboard the Titan's Wrath. When Valon stepped into the warship's halls, he was struck silent. The corridors were vast, lined with steel and shadow. The ship hummed with ancient power, yet its scars told of endless battles fought and survived. Its crew moved with quiet discipline, their uniforms mismatched, but their purpose unshaken. This was no ordinary ship. This was a relic, the last of her class. Over shared rations in the mess, Valon listened to their story. The Titan's Wrath had once served in a great war long forgotten by most empires. When peace came, she had been abandoned at the edge of nowhere. But her crew had refused to surrender her to time. Generation after generation had kept her alive, patching her hull, raising children in her quarters, living and dying beneath her steel. They were exiles, yes, but proud ones. And in all those years, one rule had bound them together. No distress call went unanswered. Still, fear gnawed at Vaylon. He was one alien among a ship of warriors. What if they silenced him to protect their secret? What if they decided his knowledge was too dangerous? One evening, in the quiet of the observation deck, he asked Commander Ward directly, "Why trust me? Why not leave me to die as so many others would have?" Ward's gaze was fixed on the stars, his voice low and steady. "Because out here in the dark, life is precious. Doesn't matter who it belongs to. Human, alien, friend, stranger. We answer the call. Always." Vaylon felt something break within him then, a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying. For the first time in weeks, perhaps years, he believed in hope again. The Titan's wrath carried him back toward the borders of known space. Along the way, he saw the crew's resilience. The way they kept the ancient engines alive with ingenuity. The way they taught their children discipline and kindness alike. The way they lived as one family bound by honor. They were not conquerors, not scavengers, but guardians of a principle older than empires, to protect those who could not protect themselves. When they finally reached a populated sector, the humans made no ceremony of parting. They brought Vaylon to the edge of civilization, transferred his supplies, and prepared to vanish once more into the void. Desperate, Vaylon asked, "Where will you go now?" Ward gave a faint smile. "Wherever we're needed. Out there, someone is calling, and we'll hear them." With that, the Titan's wrath turned, engines flaring, and slipped back into the endless black. When Vaylon returned to civilization, his tale spread quickly. Many scoffed, dismissing it as delusion, an ancient ship wandering deep space, saving strangers with no reward. Impossible. But those who looked into his eyes knew the truth. He had seen them. He had stood within the halls of the last great human battleship. He had felt the weight of their creed. And so, across councils and ports, whispers grew of the legend, that in the deepest void, when hope was gone and death certain, a scarred human warship might appear. Ancient, unyielding, and resolute, a ship that answered without hesitation.